Hopefully it's working. Please look at it. Sure. What's that?
When do you think those things are?
Gets better and better every day. I do it at 6.
Do you guys stay down there?
Right.
Oh, you are?
Couldn't get the kennel for the.
I did way too much
You go
yesterday at my
in
house.
here,
Just,
do you
I
go-
had prom Saturday
We
with
found
the
a new
kids.
place in
Last
State.
week, I was
Not
up
getting
there.
any.
Yesterday, just way too
I went
much.
to a training.
I was tired.
It's in the car.
And I thought, well, I'm
Real
here.
nice.
It's like,
Big
oh,
kennels.
sleeping on the farm. Like, not at all.
The fresh air, I know.
Well, it was like, I was about to image you.
Yeah, I have a friend who takes her dog probably at least once a month.
might
When I
have
see them,
them
just
just
so
so
she
she
can be
can
okay
be
with
That's a
them.
good
You're a busy
idea.
person.
I think I didn't need it.
They let them out here.
I'm sitting
That's why
there
we wanted to
sleepy.
take care of this to
I
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Goes right now.
yeah. Well, they have, enclosed on the back of each kennel where they can run, like the area. I don't know.
How are you? Good, how are you doing? Good. Hi, Josh. Oh, okay, thanks.
Hey. Hello.
So then,
How many possibilities tomorrow? They want it cashed right away. Yes. We just got it, that's why we haven't got to you.
Nobody's talking. Yeah. Pretty quiet.
Okay, I can roll that.
Can you see us? Do you care if you see us? So, okay, just holler at me if it happens again.
It's okay, teach us a little bit. Doesn't happen very often, so most of his mind a lot.
All right, it is 6:30. I will call the Motley City Council meeting to order for May 8th, 2023. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, all members are present. council, including Darcy online. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, agenda as presented. Consent agenda. Claims on pages 1 through 4. Report. Minutes, April employee hours report. Darcy, correct my memory, we're just able to make a motion on the entire consent agenda, right? Yeah, we are, okay.
Yeah.
All right, motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Brenda, second.
Second.
We have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Hearing none, consent agenda carries. Agenda requests and presentation. First up, we have Hospital District Board update. Lisa and Lana,
Yeah, so
welcome.
John, thank you. Do you want me to just sit here?
You can sit, we're
Okay.
casual, it's not a good spot to
Right,
stand
right.
anyway.
So I passed around the packets. I'm Lisa Birga, CEO of Lakewood Health System. I've been in this role since January of this year after our longtime CEO and president, Tim Rice, retired after 42 years. So, although I've only been in this role since January, I've been at Lakewood for almost 15 years, so very familiar with Lakewood as well as the Staples Motley community. So each year we do go around to most of our townships and cities that are part of our district and give an annual update. A little more background on that. So Lakewood is kind of a dual entity organization. We are a nonprofit, Lakewood Health System, as well as we are a governmental body, the United Hospital District. And the United Hospital District consists of 10 townships, 2 cities, the city of Staples and Motley. And they comprise our board, so the 10 townships, 2 cities, and then 1 member at large make up our United Hospital District Board, which Lana is a member of. And really the dual purpose or the dual entity organization allows us to operate as a nonprofit, and then the nonprofit leases the real estate from the hospital district. And the hospital district is very similar to like a school district. It was formed way back in the 70s. The area townships decided that healthcare was important and they wanted to make sure that they could secure that in the area. And so they banded together, and basically it allows us to issue bonds, also like a school district, and then those bonds are backed by the taxing capacity of the hospital district. Lakewood has never taxed the districts, but every year we do have a levy that is ready to roll out to taxpayers, and we have to let each of our counties know that we want to pull that levy back because we won't be taxing. We are committed to not taxing, and so really each one of the board members, that's kind of their #1 priority, to make sure that we're financially strong every year and won't be taxing our townships and cities. So I can assure you, I was in the CFO role for a little over 6 years prior to this role. So I can assure you that we have the funds to pay our debt. We have 2 years banked aside. So even if we went belly up tomorrow, we have 2 years of debt payments secured. So more than what we're actually required. So anyway, onto the hospital, the district report. I won't go through this page by page, but just a little bit about, this is looking back to 22. We're almost halfway through 23. A lot of the townships we do in March. Your guys' schedule is a little different, but I'm glad that you guys do have me come just to kind of give a little update as well as answer any questions you might have. But as I shared, we had some leadership change. Once I moved out of the CFO role, we do have a new CFO, Joe Raycraft. He was our finance director, so that transition was pretty seamless as well. And then we have a new VP position, Community Health and Population Health, oversees all of our food insecurity efforts and things like that, Alicia Bauman. Just some stats, kind of the number of credentialed providers on the pie graph, just showing really how many providers we do have at Lakewood. I think when you look on our wall, there was 2 founding providers. We now have 33 physicians that are part of the physicians organization that we contract with, as well as locum and visiting specialists that also come to our organization. The following pages just highlight the new providers that we added during 2022. You've probably seen our billboards about We Choose Hope, Dr. Wade Swenson, our new oncologist. We unfortunately had a little gap in oncology coverage at the beginning of '22, and we were fortunate to land Dr. Wade Swenson. He is an amazing person and brings a large team with him to help our patients through their oncology diagnosis. And then in addition, some new APCs. We also had some retirements in '22. Dr. Sarah Israelson, Dr. John Halfin, who was our Chief Medical Officer, and then our podiatrist, Dr. Schleichert, also retired. And then a couple of providers that left our organization, most of them moved. Dr. Beachy, Dr. Gunderson, Jordan Hagar, and Carrie Kneisel. So just an update on our providers. You can see on the bar graph on the following page, we also had a little uptick in employees. Really what that related to was during COVID. We were not hiring anybody who was retiring or resigning. We were not replacing just because we did have a significant slowdown in our elective areas. That was obviously followed by a significant uptick. Things are getting back to normal, I would say. 2 weeks ago, we were finally able to lift masking at Lakewood. It's right now tied to our county transmission rate, but as of the 11th, when the emergency period is over, I think we might be done with masking. It was just very bizarre to go about your everyday, but when you went to Lakewood or any healthcare facility, you had to put it on. So, couple stats on the blue and white page. Things that I like to point out is we had almost 10,000 ER visits within our ED. And then probably the most astounding stat is we had 510 births at Lakewood in 2022. So up about 60 births from the year before. We only have 25 beds in our hospital. That's all we're allowed to have. And we have 3 labor and delivery rooms. So you can kind of do the math on that. We're actually trending to be above that this year as well. So we have 4 OB providers and then a really strong family practice group that also delivers babies. So definitely bringing in a large radius of patients on that, because I don't think we have 510 students in the classes at Staples Motley, unfortunately, but we'll work on that. Financial update, we did have 5% growth over the prior year. We were up just almost $9 million, and that was without any rate increases. We haven't increased our prices since for 8 years, so all of that was just raw growth. Our operating cash did decrease about $14 million. A lot of that is due to the COVID funds that we were holding on to that we knew had to be paid back. Those have now, within 23, been completely paid back. But our cash balance is still strong and continuing to increase. Our 23 goals remain the same, 3% margin, keep our days cash on hand over 180 days. And right now we are trending right at that 180 days, like I said, with the provider relief funds being paid back, and then we are right at that 3% margin for the year. A few pages follow, just talk about the growth. You may be seeing west of Ernie's, the plaza that's being put up. That's a multi-use building. We have single-family apartments on top. What we run into a lot is as we're trying to recruit staff, they don't have housing anywhere to live, and so sometimes they'll end up going to a different facility because they don't want to do the long commute. So this will help with some of that transitional housing or temporary housing, as well as we do bring in traveling staff, and so that'll allow for that. And then of course they'll be up for rent for just regular families. And then down below we have a partnership with Twin Cities Orthopedics, and we'll be doing sports medicine and sports performance programming in the lower level of that, and then additional tenants to come and be identified. Following page with a lot of text, basically what that is our electronic health record. We are converting to a new one in August. The reason why we share that is when that happens, it seems like a simple flip of a switch, but there's a lot of background that goes into that. Been working on it for a little over a year, and there'll be a little bit of slowdown as you come in to register, so please be patient.
Lisa, could you explain one more time the housing?
Sure.
Exactly what that is?
So the upper level of the plaza will be 1 and 2 bedroom. There's 11 apartments. And so the reason why actually, when we were building the building, we were just going to do commercial space, retail space, but because there's a really lack of inventory in the Staples Motley area, which people can probably attest to, we decided to kind of help out that inventory and bring in more of that starter level housing for hopefully our employees or future patients. And then in addition, kind of on the housing front, we also are in the process of constructing 4 homes in Staples. We purchased some land from the city at a pretty fair price, and worked with the lumberyard as well as Holes Construction, and are just building 4 starter homes, one a little bit upgraded, but 3 starter homes in Valley View, and then one on 2nd Street and Staples. Have also reached out to the city of Motley as far as, are there opportunities within this community too, once those houses are complete as well. Because housing obviously is a barrier to people moving into an area and securing jobs, so we want to make sure we can help out on that front as well. All right, and then the following pages are just a little bit of our marketing, like I said, our billboards that have been up. The foundation, the dinner auction, that actually happened 2 weekends ago. We raised, I think, the final numbers aren't in, but a little over $90,000 were raised at the dinner auction. So all of that goes to help with our food insecurity efforts. We do deliver food into backpacks at the schools for kids who are identified as not having meals on weekends. We also deliver food to the high-rise and Staples, as well as meals to families that are clinically screened in our clinic of having concerns about where they will secure their next meal. So that's where most of our foundation funds are targeted. And then the following pages I won't bore you with, but really what this is just an overview of, we are required as a nonprofit to complete a 990 community health needs assessment. It's basically our tax return. It's really narrative in nature versus numerical, and as part of that community health needs assessment, our strategies as an organization has to work to identify the shortfalls that are identified within the community health needs assessment. And so this just speaks to kind of where we're tying our strategy together with what's identified in that, promoting quality of life, improving access to care, and then enhancing the built environments. The largest thing with enhancing the built environments within the community is our partnership with the Staples Motley School District. And with that, we are pooling our funds with their construction funds, and we'll start on the nest actually probably in the next few weeks. And what that is they're enhancing their current facility, and we're adding our funds to add a walking track up above, some multi-purpose space. And with that, our funds are basically being treated as a prepaid lease and prepaid memberships. So all of our employees, and then as well as we'll have patient passes. So when a patient comes in for any surgery in January, we have somewhere to send them to get some steps in versus having them drive to Brainerd to walk the mall or something like that. So that will be open the fall of '24. And I think that is everything on the last page. There is contact information for myself as well as Dr. Albrecht. She's our Chief Medical Officer. And then I said Joe Raycraft, our new CFO. And then additionally Jackie Lahr. She's kind of the main person. If you have concerns or complaints, she's who you would contact and get you to the person that can hopefully address that. So feel free to reach out to these two if there are questions or concerns. Because if we don't know about it, we can't fix it. Are there any questions that I can answer for the group? And Lana does a great job. She's super engaged. She's at all the meetings. So.
Thank you.
Right, if anybody has any concerns, you can always contact me too, and then I'll take them to the board.
Good job.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Lisa, if you would please pass along, I already have to your hospice department and your ER department my sincere gratitude for the last couple of months of my world. And on a humble note, Dr. Alex Sauer, I was her junior high basketball coach, so I'm glad.
They are getting younger and younger.
I'm glad only she's aging and I'm not. So that's pretty cool to see. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
You got it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
I can't move as fast, sorry.
Mr. Archer with our annual audit.
All right. So you each should have 3 documents in front of you. One is the audited financial statements, one titled report to the members of governance, and then a summary slide deck. And so we'll walk through the summary tonight. And if you have any questions, you really want to do a deep dive, we can open the other books, but generally speaking, that doesn't usually happen at these meetings. Not that this couldn't be one of the first, but
Excuse me, do you happen to have any notes for this? Thank you so much.
so just to jump in, and maybe taking a step back and looking at an audit from a high-level view, The whole purpose of an audit is that we go in, we take a look at your financial records. And the reason we do that is because we give an opinion at the end of the audit on whether we think your financial statements are correct or not. And so we've done that again this year. And the opinion that we're giving this year is no different than what you've received in the past, which is an unmodified opinion, or you could really think of it like a clean opinion. That's us saying that based on our procedures, looking at different invoices, looking at your bank statements, looking at your financial records, we think your numbers are correct, materially correct. That's what you want to hear. Jumping into the next page, there are some items that we're actually required to communicate with you as the city council. Not really related to the financial records, but instead about how the audit itself went. So this is what we would call the report to members of governance, just summarized. It talks more about if we had any difficulties in performing the audit, any unusual financial records that we came across while we're performing the audit, disagreements with management, if we had any of those that would be mentioned here. And if we just had general issues with your accounting policies or procedures. And we didn't have any of that, so it's a very clean report. Not mentioned on this page, but maybe it's notable to mention, this year your city actually did implement a new accounting standard called GASB 87, and it's related to leases. And the reason it's not mentioned on this page is because after going through the analysis for this new standard, we took a look at your leases that you have. You actually didn't have any leases that were material enough or significant enough to implement. And so we went through the analysis behind the scenes. The actual effect on your financial statements that we're issuing is really no effect at all. And so it makes your financial statements more comparable now that you didn't have to adopt it, but I thought it may be worth bringing it up. The other thing that's behind the scenes that you're not seeing on this page is our profession went through a new auditing standard. And so just like you have accounting standards that you have to follow, we have standards that we have to follow when we're going through our audit. This is related to primarily internal controls and internal control documentation. So historically, when we perform your audit, we've always done a dive into your controls, your processes and your controls. And that hasn't changed, but what has changed is the level of detail that we dive into this year. And so this year we really rolled up our sleeves. We bugged poor Darcy a lot and really dug into your processes and your controls. And the reason we do all that, just to reflect back to the whole purpose of an audit, is we use that information to design what areas we focus harder on and what areas maybe we don't focus quite as hard on. And because if you think about it, your processes, your controls generally lead to risk. And so what areas are riskier based on your controls, what areas aren't as risky. And so it was behind the scenes change, nothing that really affects the overall outcome, but worth mentioning also. And speaking of internal controls, and the reason I say there was not a significant change is because after going through that process, we're actually giving the same internal control recommendations that we have in the past. One being that we've posted audit adjustments for you, which were really not unusual compared to what we've posted in the past. And really mostly related to adjusting your enterprise funds, your proprietary funds, so your water fund, in adding in things like the value of your infrastructure, long-term debt, receivables, payables. These are things that we've always done for you since I've been working on your audit, which is probably over 10 years now. We also report a lack of segregation of duties in your accounting function. That hasn't changed. So here we're saying that based on the limited staff you have, it's just inherent that you're not going to have a lot of overlap in those duties, which means more risk, right? Risk of error because there's maybe fewer checks and balances. And also risk of fraud because there's maybe not as much oversight on the transaction. So we're just letting you know that that risk does exist. And then the final is that we prepare your financial statements for you, which are, they're getting quite thick. So it's actually unusual for us not to prepare financial statements for our clients. It does happen, pretty rare. And the final thing that we look at in terms of compliance and controls is compliance with Minnesota statutes. And so here we're talking about things like if you're accepting bids in quotes when you're supposed to be. We take a look at your bank accounts and make sure that they're collateralized like they should be. We look at conflicts of interest. and that you're following the right protocol with your council meetings, along with some other things. And here we're reporting that based on those procedures, we had no findings, so everything looked good. Okay, we're going to dive into some numbers next, starting with the general fund first. And so here we're looking at really the same format we've looked at over the past several years, but we're looking at 2021 as a benchmark, 2022, and then your 2022 budget as another benchmark. And really, if you think about it, 2021 is not a great benchmark because we're still seeing some of the effects of some COVID-related transactions, but that's what we have, and so that's what we're using. So just looking at this very broadly first, overall, you had planned for a spend down in your general fund of $1,000. The reality is you actually increased your fund balance by $46,000 for the year. And that's driven by both revenues coming in higher than what you budgeted, and actually some cost savings on your expenditures coming in below what you budgeted. So if we jump to the next page, here we're going to take a deeper dive into your revenues, broken up by category. And so your city, just like most cities, has concentrations in property tax collections and intergovernmental revenues or state aids. And so really those are the two areas that we try to focus on the most in terms of revenue. Property tax revenue came in actually quite close to budget, about $2,000 below what you planned. Intergovernmental, also fairly close to budget, about $5,800 higher than what you budgeted. And the reason for that is because you had some fire and police aid, pass-through aid that flowed through this area. Other revenue streams that are maybe just a little bit notable, probably the most notable is miscellaneous, which is a term that us accountants don't generally like, but that's what we're looking at here because we're following the reporting categories that the state auditor likes to see. Miscellaneous came in quite a bit higher than what you budgeted. We're looking at $25,000 versus about $4,000 in budget. That's really driven by some contributions, some donations, and some reimbursements that you received this year.
So in this case, miscellaneous was good, the revenue's coming in.
Yeah.
Back along.
Correct, yep. Looking at your spending next. Spending, you have spending concentrations on just your general government operations, public safety and public works, very normal spending for a city your size. General government spending came in, we'll say about $5,000 higher than what you budgeted. Public works came in about $5,000 below what you budgeted, so the two essentially wash each other out. Other maybe notable areas, parks and recreation, capital outlay, both of those areas came in, we'll say roughly $4,000 or $5,000 below what you budgeted. That's really what drove that $10,000 budgetary savings at the end of the year, those two spending categories. But overall, nothing really too notable looking at the detail on any of your spending in the general fund. Your fund balance at the end of the year in the general fund came in at $924,000. Looking at the unassigned unrestricted portion of that relative to the size of your spending in the general fund, comes up to about 150% of a year's expenditure. So a year and a half of expenditure sitting in your unassigned fund balance, which is a healthy fund balance position to be in. You know. And actually relatively consistent over, we'll say, the last 4 years. And looking at the cash balance in the general fund, here we're seeing kind of a trend analysis for cash over the past 5 years. You'll see cash has been steadily increasing in the general fund. Cash at the end of 2022 came in at $924,000. Looking at the next page, we're looking at the fire fund first. Fire fund had an increase in fund balance of $43,000. Fund balance at the end of the year was $147,000. If you were to dive down into the detail that's not on this page, you'd see that revenues came in higher than what we planned on, mostly because of some intergovernmental or some state aids that flowed through. Spending actually came in slightly below what you had planned on for your budget. So this one had a pretty healthy increase in fund balance as well. And then you'll notice we have a column that says non-major governmental funds. And as you know, the city has many more governmental funds, debt service, special revenue. Most of them are relatively small, and so we actually aggregate them together in the audit. Here we're looking at an overall aggregate decrease in your fund balance of $3,400. Ending fund balance is fairly significant, mostly because of your debt service funds. Ending fund balance is 1.6 million in aggregate. If you were to dive down in that detail, you'd see all of these funds have positive fund balances, and there really were no concerns with any of them. And looking at the cash in these funds, not a lot to say on this page. Cash in the fire fund at the end of the year is $147,000. The cumulative cash for the remaining governmental funds, $1.42 million. Looking at the water fund next. Water fund actually had a spend down in net position for fund balance of $13,876. This fund has a pretty sizable net position or fund balance at the end of the year of $4.46 million, and really most of that net position represents the value of your infrastructure, your water infrastructure. Looking at the detail a little bit further, you'll see revenues actually came in slightly below 2021. We're using 2021 as a benchmark here. Really closer in line to 2020 and 2020 revenues. And expenditures came in at $307,000, which is actually higher than what you've seen in the past. Looking at the detail here, you'd see material costs have increased and some repair and maintenance costs also hit the fund this year. Sewer fund is up next. Similar story with the sewer fund, where we're seeing an increase in your expenditures. This is also driven by material costs coming in higher this year, which is not unusual, especially with inflation that we're seeing right now. This fund also had a decrease in net position of $28,000. Net position at the end of the year is just under $3.4 million. And again, this fund, that net position really represents, a lot of that represents your infrastructure value. Solid waste is a fund that there's really not a lot to say about, because it's really driven by the collections that you make within the city for the service, and then what you're paying your service provider. Here we're seeing an actual decrease in net position of $7,100, and this fund has a net position of $3,200 at the end of the year. And it's very common for a solid waste fund to be essentially running close to break even. This is not unusual. Looking at the cash in these funds, again, here we're seeing the solid waste fund with essentially break-even cash coming in at $231. Water fund has $1,072,000 in it. Sewer fund has $2,221,000 in it at the end of the year. The thing to keep in mind is, as you all already know, is the cost of infrastructure improvements, repairs, build-outs in these funds is incredibly expensive, and so it's good to see that you're carrying a sizable cash balance in these funds.
Along those lines, is there anything that we, the cost of materials going up, labor going up, is there anything we should be more mindful of moving forward? Or is it just the cost of doing business?
It's just the cost of doing business. The answer that's maybe not incredibly popular is keep an eye on your rates along with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because as you're seeing inflation on your costs, you want to make sure you're still sustaining those funds. They should really be standing alone if possible.
Okay. Thank you.
The next two pages look at the debt in your funds. Here we're looking at governmental funds first. And just showing the trend line on how things are going to flow for the next, we'll say 5 or 7 years. And looking at these funds, assuming that you don't have any additional debt over the next number of years, you're looking at your last payment actually in 2028 for the governmental funds. And looking at your proprietary funds next, here we're projecting out to a final payment date of 2034 for your total debt. You obviously will have one of your debt issuances being paid off in 2030, which is why you're seeing that step down on this chart. On the final page in this slide deck, one thing I want to mention, I talked about new standards affecting the city. Well, our profession hasn't sat still, and we have another new standard we're going to be looking at next year. Very similar to leases, but this time related to subscription-based IT services. An example might be if you have like an Office 365 subscription where you pay a monthly fee for these IT services. If you have a contract or a service like that, and it's in a contract in excess of 1 year, we'll be looking at that and would have to record a liability for the cost of that, and then an asset for the right of use of that for the next foreseeable future. We'll dive into it next year. My first blush at it is I don't think it's going to have a significant effect to your city, but just so you're aware that it's something that we'll be looking at next year. I know that was about a 10,000 foot view, but any questions? Overall, audit went really well. Darcy, it looks like she's not on the call anymore. She did a really nice job.
I'm
getting
sorry, I
us,
don't know what happened.
She did a very nice job getting us information, answering questions. We were very happy with working with her.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
We're fortunate to have her, and we were, I think, to the benefit, we found Elaine
Yeah.
to cover maternity leave, which
Yeah.
allowed us to have this presentation tonight.
Right, exactly.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll leave the extra copies here since Darcy's not here to grab them.
I'll leave them on her desk.
Okay, thank you.
very much.
Yep, have a nice evening.
Thank you, yeah, you too.
You don't want to stay inside the rest of the night?
No, oh, it's tempting.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yeah.
So I got Darcy, she's just wondering if you can try
Thanks,
to
Joe.
get hooked back up to Zoom again.
Yep.
She's still waiting.
I've
there.
tried it a few times, I
Okay.
don't know what happened, let me try
Otherwise, she said
again.
if one of
If
you
you
guys
guys-
want to just call her.
I was
or
gonna say, would a
speaker.
phone call just be
Oh.
easier on speaker?
So,
Thank you. We had a request here, letter C with Lonnie K for Mobile Vet Clinic. Seeing Lonnie, so we'll move on. Department reports, planning and zoning.
Is phone speaker okay with everyone?
Totally fine. Yep.
Hello.
Hi, you're on speaker.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Are you gonna take it?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
You got great reviews with your work on the audit, and the audit was well done, so.
Perfect.
Yeah, all right. Moving on to fire department business. Let's see, not here, we have the written report. So we will move on to C, police department.
all right, reports on pages 16 through 18. Got a total of 68 calls per month, bringing us up to 305. And you can see the breakdown of calls there. Anybody has any questions? If not, moving on to part 2, nuisance letters. Bruce and I went around a couple weeks ago, looking at properties throughout the city, and we ended up, I wrote about 24 or so nuisance letters to various residents, letting them know if there were items that needed to be attended to. So those have been sent out. They were encouraged to take part in the citywide cleanup day to help with those issues. So hopefully it'll be a good turnout, and be following up with them in a week or two here.
Good.
Do we have a list of the properties?
As like in a spreadsheet or something, I don't. It's just the notes we took down, and then I wrote out letters to all the different properties.
Okay.
Public Works, any other comments, concerns, business? Chief, no?
No,
All right.
nothing for me.
Public Works, Bruce.
19's report. Everything seems back on track. You got any questions on that? Not? None. Well, for a locator with a GPS in it, I'd like to apply for the OSHA safety grant. Try and offset some of that cost. So that's tomorrow. Need approval. I think they get refunded in the 1st of June or something.
A motion to apply for the OSHA safety
I
grant?
got it.
Oh, yep.
I didn't understand what you said at first.
Oh, I want to apply for the OSHA safety grant for a locator with a GPS, or with GPS, and we'll be able to go to each of our curb stops and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
And,
Now I get
map
it.
all that stuff out, and then be able to use it for pinpoint locating.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
You'll be your own Google, in other words. Press the button, I am here.
One inch.
There we go. A motion from Pat, second.
Second.
With a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, apply away.
Thank you. And,
Start. Oh,
oh, the only other thing I was comment, Brian did get his class D passed, so.
good.
His license for wastewater.
Wonderful.
Are you ready for me?
We're ready.
Okay, I couldn't hear anyone else really, so. Alright, so the water usage report's on page 20. If anyone has any questions about that, we're doing really good. Barely losing water. On page 21 is the 401 fund update. I just wanted to give that to everybody since we've had a lot of discussion about it. It includes the 2022 budget surplus transfers that you'll approve later here in the meeting. And yeah, just to get everyone kind of thinking about that stuff, if there's anything you want to do differently there, or think about what to do with the city hall money. Any questions on that?
No, I think, just as a side note, I think your desire to want to get more specific seems to complement the results of the audit as they were presented. So I think we should all really take what you've presented us and think about moving in that direction based on some of the notes that you provided us with the packet. Would be my suggestion for people to think about when we get more formal with it in a meeting or two to come. Does that make sense?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, and then I got the idea of doing work sessions from other cities, so I just thought I'd kind of throw the idea out there. Some cities will do it beforehand, and they can dive deeper into the agenda. Some do it afterwards so that they can tell the public they're gonna have a public or a work session. But it just kind of gives another chance for us to discuss things, and we could do council training, review things in more depth, and it's just an idea I have that I want to throw out there.
Are those usually public then, Darcy?
Yes. It's just like a special meeting, so it's public. It's just less formal than a council meeting.
Do other cities just do them prior to the meeting? Is that what you said?
Some do. Not from the couple of cities I heard that did it. One did do it beforehand, and one did it after. Because they like that they could announce it at the end of the council meeting and say that they're about to go into it. Another one did it before so that, they could discuss anything that needed more discussion from the agenda. Yeah, it's just some different things other cities do.
The idea is that we're able to talk openly, but we're as a council, so we have to be public. We discuss our homework before we make decisions. And some
Yep.
boards and agencies will pick a whole nother Monday night and do it, or a Tuesday night, or just, I think we should consider it with some of the things we have coming up, just the newness of the council and still coming together as a group. I think it's a good idea. maybe there's one, next month or when the topics get a little deeper, Darcy, that you think it makes sense. I would like to see us try it before the meeting as opposed to after.
Okay.
I know when I went to the League of Minnesota Cities workshop at the beginning of the year, that was something too, that a lot of cities do these workshops. And like you said, they're usually another night, but I like the idea of before so that,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're not
Yeah,
that
we
big.
do, the only workshops that we really do, we do budget workshops, towards the end of the year when we're working on budget, but that's pretty much the only ones we do.
Yeah. I think it's a good suggestion.
So I don't know if you guys want to start doing that, or if you want to think about it, and we can reconvene next meeting and go from there.
What is the date of our next meeting? I'm sure it's printed or something. It would be June 12th.
June 12th.
I say just schedule one for June 12th. Let's give it a
Yeah.
shot.
Okay, what time would you guys like to start?
I am on the town that meeting for business meetings.
So Brenda wouldn't be here, but I would say, I'm gonna let the agenda present itself, and I would say it's either 5:30 or 6 based on the topics we may need to discuss. How's that?
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll try this one and then we can talk about if it works and what we want to do going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
General fund budget update.
Yep, so that's just current update for the budget, where we're at. If anyone has any questions, just a quick little summary to show you guys. Otherwise, on page 24 is